we're actually in a really interesting time in terms of where Smash Melee is at in 2016. And this is actually like the first time in a really long time where we can really say that Hungrybox is defining the metagame. And what I mean by that is usually there is a when you look at any like esport or game, you most people are going to be focusing on who's like really dominant or who's the best, and how do we come up with strategies to beat what that team is doing. So in basketball, it's the Warriors. How do we deal with Steph Curry? How do we make sure we guard Draymond Green on the pick and roll? And so every team is wondering like, how do we either model that, or how do we beat that? We look at in League of Legends, we look at the Korean teams, what champions they're picking, what's their pick ban phase, how are they rotating, what do they emphasize as objectives in the game, and how do we mimic that, or how do we beat that? And so that's what all the other kind of regions try to have to do. And when we look at Smash over time, we could look at different periods of time and say, well, in the early days of Melee, like how do we deal with Ken's aggressive Marth, and how do we deal with him? To later on, how do we deal with Mewtwo Marth because it's quote unquote perfect? How do we deal with Mango's Puff? How do we deal with Armada's Peach? How do we deal with Mango's really aggressive Spaceys? And now we're at the point where everybody is looking at Hungrybox. And I'm going to say Hungrybox right now is defining the metagame. It's not Armada when you look at it this way. Yes, Armada's Peach, all the people below the big six, they're still going to have to think of solutions to how to win that matchup. And Armada is, undoubtedly dominant in the matchup, although he's had some really close calls, against like Kobold, Silent Wolf, where they take a game. But overall, even when you look at the very top of the very top of Melee, everybody's thinking, like, how do I deal with Hungrybox? How do we deal with this Puff? It's not really as much Armada's Peach, Armada's Fox, or Mango's Spaceys. It's how do we deal with this Puff? How do we come up with a strategy to beat this? What characters do I have to pick up? Armada single-handedly had to pick up two characters, Young Link and Fox, over time to defend against the Puff, and he's losing. Hungrybox is defining playstyles too. Mango back in 2010 when Hungrybox won Apex 2010, Mango being Scorpion Master at the time played Hungrybox after he won the event, won 6 straight friendlies, and most of them weren't even close, so Mango still had his dominant edge, even though he couldn't play Mario or Captain Falcon and win against Hungrybox. He could still go Fox and play however the hell he wanted. But now you look at Mango in 2016, he can't really play his style anymore. He's even openly admitted to saying, hey, like, I have to laser camp this guy. This guy is too good at defense, too consistent. I can't win playing the Mango way. And you look at Armada, he has to play a very specific way. Leffen, he plays his own way because that's the right way to play the matchup. But you look at everybody on the list, he single-handedly made everybody in his Big House 5 bracket pick Fox against him. All the Sheik mains were picking Fox. And overall, like, we look at it this a year ago, he had close calls with Shroom. Plup had a mini run. People like Lucky, SFAT had close calls or even won against him. But now these sets aren't even that close. Like, it's now, like, can you even take a game against Hungrybox? We look at Hungrybox over the last weekend. Sweeps Swedish Delight, 3-0s hacks, dominates Lucky, dominates Shroomed, and a lot of these sets of him against anyone outside the big six, honestly, anyone outside of Mango and Armada and maybe Leffen have not been close at all. The sets have been dominant. They have been one-sided. He even like pulled a 4-stock on hacks the other day, and like his level of dominance against people like outside the top 4, like, almost replicates Armada in terms of like win percentage these days. So it's actually like a phenomenal thing to have. Now the question is, I hope people don't leave with the backlash of like, oh, like Hungrybox is ruining the game, but merely I'm stating like Hungrybox is so dominant right now that he is on pace. He's the guy that everybody's looking at to say like, hey, like, I have to figure out how to beat this guy. Once upon a time, just like over most of last year, it's Armada, and not to say like Armada's not like not what people think about, but like you look at the forerunner right now and it's Hungrybox. And so this is kudos to him. This is something I would never really imagined that I would say ever, especially with how kind of like pedestrian he looked in 2015, especially the first half. But now like Hungrybox is coming up with new zoning schemes, his mix-ups are better, his edge guards are cleaner, and he's a wrecking ball to that is just like tearing everything in his path. And I'm not sure what people come up with, because it's like a really interesting dilemma here, because when he's forcing everybody to pick Fox, it's kind of interesting because everybody's picking Fox. He's becoming better against Fox. He's finding all these solutions to beating people because he's playing the matchup 10 times more than anybody else. And actually creates an interesting dilemma for a lot of players. And what I mean is this. So Hungrybox plays Puff, a really low APM character, and what I mean by APM is actions per minute. His controller's not going to be busted. He doesn't really have to shield drop or input these really demanding things that could strain your hands, whereas, all these other people who play Fox, it's really hard for me to think of a Fox player that, is in the top 15, top 20 that doesn't have hand issues. And we look at, Mango, who has hand issues if he plays too long. Armada has controller issues. He needs to replace his controller and get used to it. That was a big problem at Battle of the Five Gods. So this is actually like a really interesting thing that's developing over time where, you tell these Fox players who aren't beating Hungrybox do better. And by doing better, it means you have to practice more. If you practice more, then your hands get worse. They strain, your controller fatigues. So, there's going to be certain points in time, I imagine, up ahead where like a Fox will be able to beat Hungrybox in a set and then later find out that his hands hurt or his controller breaks and he has to get another controller and then he falls apart. And so it's going to be a really interesting 2016. I'm not saying that Hungrybox is by far like leaps and bounds over anybody. I still put him at number 2, overall. Like, all right, I have to still give Armada the spot. But just for the fact that everybody's minds are on Hungrybox and how to defeat him is something that's really new and foreign to even me.